Hey guys, this is Dawood from AutoMarketplace. Thanks for joining us today. So today we're going to get right into it. There's a TLC public hearing tomorrow. It's fairly important. It's about a wheelchair, the reaffirmation of a wheelchair accessible mandate we've spoken about before. So let's get right into this. I'll try to keep the video short. Obviously, we know we run long. We're kind of a long form platform, but we'll try to keep this as short as possible, but it's kind of technical. Okay, so what we do is we usually do, as you know, we usually do a video and then we embed the video that we do in an article that we publish. So in this instance, it's more a podcast we're publishing, but we've written about what's going on in a previous article. So the headline that you'll see is NYC's 50% WAV mandate is shaking up the taxi medallion market. AutoMarketplace, myself, goes over why the reaffirmation of a 50% wheelchair accessible vehicle WAV mandate is a big deal for the NYC taxi medallion market. So this is very short. The NYC Taxi and Limousine Commission, TLC, will hold a Zoom-only public hearing tomorrow, Thursday, October 10th, related to proposed rules that mandate all new taxi medallion hack-ups and rehacks be attached to a wheelchair-accessible vehicle WAV. Instead of saying that whole word, those three words all the time, the shortened form of wheelchair-accessible vehicle is WAV. This public hearing comes after a federal judge recently affirmed a previous 2014 ruling that mandates 50% of yellow cabs be waived. Next week, on Wednesday, October 16th, the TLC has now confirmed it will hold a Board of Commissioners vote to waive the typical 30-day period after new rules are proposed, that's known as promulgation, and vote on the new WAV mandate-related regulations that will redefine the taxi medallion market. To be fair, the TLC is likely in a rush to pass new rules to comply with the court order, but it's unclear why the regulator needs to act less than a week after the first public hearing on the matter. In today's video, I'll explain why this development is such a big deal for the NYC taxi medallion yellow cab industry, which has only just begun to recover from an existential crisis, which we've covered and many other people have covered, that started shortly after the original 2014 50% WAV mandate ruling. And so there's, all the links that we reference will be provided in the video description and within this article in our Substack. So the hearing is tomorrow. So if you want to sign up to speak at that hearing, it's not an in-person hearing. The deadline is today. That's why we're kind of in a rush to get this video out. And then on Thursday, October 16th, I'm sorry, I said Wednesday. On Thursday, October 16th, one second. Sorry, I'm looking at this. It is Wednesday. I think that's a mistake. Next week, whatever. I got a double check. I think October 16th is Wednesday. I'm sorry about this. I believe it's Wednesday. In any case, it must be a mistake by the TLC. But on Wednesday, October 16th, they'll hold a TLC Board of Commissioner vote, and we'll embed the YouTube video as well. But this is actually a podcast, so you can directly see it on our Substack. Okay, so let's get into what this is about. In terms of, these are the PDFs. We'll provide the links. So the hearing is tomorrow, but it's a Zoom only hearing, but this is not a in-person public hearing. There will be no in-person public hearing. And it says to participate in the public hearing, please email the TLC or call the TLC by 5 p.m. today. So that's why we're in a bit of a rush to publish this. Then this is the vote on, I'm almost positive it's Wednesday, October 16th. And you can see here, commission vote, and then a commission vote 100% wheelchair accessible vehicle taxis, and commission vote on waiver of 30-day period after promulgation, which just means after rules are proposed for the first time, it's publicly announced for the first time. So they have to, they're in a rush to do this basically. Okay, so yesterday we published an article. We just kind of went over this, that please sign up for tomorrow. Then there's, at that time, they actually in this announcement, they actually say Wednesday, October 16th, but they didn't actually give what the agenda was about. So this morning or sometime after we published this last night, we said the TLC should immediately clarify the meeting agenda. So now they've done that. We're not saying they did it because of us. Maybe they plan to do it anyways, but they've now done that. I think they made an error. It is Wednesday, October 16th. And so let's talk about what this is all about. Okay. So on September 13th, we wrote an article about the background to this wheelchair accessible vehicle mandate, what it's all about. So it's just one article. We're just going to read kind of verbatim and explain the article. It's kind of a dense article, but we think it should provide enough of a background and help people who want to maybe testify at the public hearing and help people understand uh, basically this article, once we go over it, it should help people understand why this is such a big deal. And if anybody wants to speak at this hearing, again, the deadline is today at 5 p.m. Hopefully it'll provide enough background to help those people speak at the hearing. So let's get right into it. So the NYC Taxi and Limousine Commission must stick to its prior agreement and make 50% of all active yellow cabs wheelchair accessible by March 2025, and 50% of all authorized issue taxi medallions, of which there's 13,587 by the end of 2028. U.S. District Court Judge George B. Daniels ruled the TLC must abide by a 2014 legal settlement that mandated 50% of all taxi medallions be attached to a WAV by 2020. Due to the pandemic, the 2020 deadline was temporarily extended. And so here's the, again, the links are provided on August 29th. George B. Daniels, U.S. District Judge. It says the original settlement agreement, this is just part of the court rule order, but the original settlement agreement and amended settlement agreement remain enforceable. So the 2014 agreement remains enforceable, and defendants shall, so the defendants will be the TLC in this instance, shall, one, immediately take all necessary steps to modify TLC's current 50% rule to implement a 100% rule until they meet the authorized and active medallion requirements. So authorized is in reference to 13,587 medallions that exist, and active are the ones that are actually on the road. And two, provide biannual reports as prescribed, to class counsel and this court beginning on January 10th. So the first, I guess there's new reporting requirements that are going to be, I assume, January and July, if it's biannual meaning, I don't know if that means biennial or biannual. I assume that's biennial, meaning twice a year. Plaintiff's request for attorney's fee. Okay. So here, okay. So plaintiff's request for Okay. If defendants fail to meet the active medallion requirement by March 31st of next year, or are not on schedule to meet the authorized medallion requirement by the end of 2028. Okay, so let's briefly go over that. I think it's helpful to bring up this TLC. This is in the fact book. Again, we'll provide the link to all of this, but very helpfully. So very simply, okay, these are all the for-hire vehicles. Okay, so there's 13. Okay, so let's level set for it. So there's 13,587 authorized taxi medallions. So there's 13,587 taxi medallions in existence. 4,158 are in storage according to the fact book. Now, all of these numbers, for some reason, if you kind of add this up, like there's 9,462 working taxis. There's 9,163 licensed yellow taxis that are active. There's 4,148. So anyways, I don't want to get into the math of this right now, but if you do the math, things are slightly off. Like, I wish it would just be as simple as, this plus that. Like, if I do the quick math, 9,000, get my calculator out. So if we do 9,163 plus 4,158, so if you do, there's 9,163 licensed yellow taxis, but there's 4,158 insured. That gets to 13,321. So 13,321. Tell me if I'm doing the math wrong. So that's not 13,587. Obviously, if there's more, maybe we can bridge it somehow if there's the working taxis minus this number. So in any case, I think that's defeating the point. Maybe there's the TLC should correct this math or make it more simple. But more importantly, and to the point of the hearing, is right now there's 11,606 accessible vehicles. Most of them are non-yellow cab TLC plated cars. And that was the TLC argument that, hey, we have so many of these that didn't exist before, but the judge didn't really buy that or didn't want to hear that. So of the 9,163 yellow cabs, 3,834 are wheelchair accessible, so wave taxis. So I think that's a little more than 40%. So by March, that number needs to be 50%. Or if this number stays the same, that needs to go up, or this needs to go up in conjunction with that needing to go up, and you get the point. But by 2028, of the 13,587, so I'm probably doing a bad job doing this. Okay, so by March 31st of next year, of the active yellow cabs, 50% should be wheelchair accessible. And by the end of 2028, 50% of all yellow cabs, so the 13,587 issued taxi medallions, need to be attached to wheelchair accessible vehicles, WAVE vehicles. Okay. So getting back to the article. So according to Gothamist report, okay, we just went over the numbers. Okay, so let's start out with what I call NYC Taxi Medallion 101. So before we continue, it's important we overview the tax medallion market basics to provide context for more technical discussion. So NYC tax medallion classifications. So these are the current medallion classifications before we get into everything needing to be waived. So this is how the market used to function. So let's go over this. It's important to understand the status quo, to understand why this is such a big deal. So right now there's five general categories. So there's selected, so which is also known as unrestricted selected, or it's referred to as an unrestricted medallion too. But selected is the more commonly used phrase. So that requires the first vehicle attached to a taxi medallion be a wave, and then it needs to be a wave for 4 years, a minimum of 4 years, and then it can be non-wave. And then there's these TIF payments, which we'll get into later. There's a fund that compensates drivers to incentivize them to attach their vehicles to buy a wave. And so a medallion owner receives compensation initially and then quarterly, and then they also receive on a per trip basis. And we'll get into that later. Okay, so category one of the status quo medallion market is selected. Then you have non-selected, which is the reverse. So the first vehicle has to be a wave, and after 4 years, the first vehicle cycle, I should say, has to be wave. Then after 4 years, or after the vehicle retirement, so it could be 7 years, then it has to, then it can be, let me start over. The first vehicle can be anything. So it can be a RAV4 or a Camry. And then after 4 to 7 years, basically, it can be, it has to be a wave, and then it can revert back. And so it's the opposite of selected. It's a vehicle cycle is wave first, then not wave, then wave. And in selected, it's not wave. I'm sorry, I'm doing that reverse. In selected, it has to be wave first, then not wave, then wave. In not selected, it can be not wave, then not wave again. So selected, not selected. So obviously in the medallion market, if you can attach a non-wave, a cheaper vehicle, a vehicle that might, let's say drivers like to drive more, it's going to be a premium to buy this type of medallion versus a selected. So and both of these are referred to as unrestricted medallions. Then you have an alternative fuel medallion, which is, there's not too many of these. I think there's like a few hundred of them, but it requires the first vehicle attached to a medallion be a hybrid or electric vehicle, and then it has to be a hybrid or EV wave. Obviously, there's not really that many electric vehicle waves out there right now. So I guess you can do like a Toyota Sienna. I guess all Siennas are hybrid anyways. So this is basically like a EV hybrid. It's basically like a non-selected EV hybrid. But our understanding is now, since there's a lot of confusion related to this, there's like a lottery going on. Anyways, that's a whole different discussion, but that's an alternative fuel medallion. Then you have a permanent wave, which is straightforward enough. It always has to be a wave. And then I guess there's 4 categories. And then a mini fleet is when you have 2 medallions. One has to be a wave. So one has to be a selected, and then one is a non-selected. But nowadays, these mini fleets can be split into 2 medallions. So, and here we write, court has ordered all newly hacked yellow cabs be accessible until the 50% threshold is met, regardless of current medallion classification. So this is the status quo. So now if everything must be wave, and we'll get into that it's going to take years to meet that requirement. So effectively, everything is becoming permanent wave, you could say. So this type of status quo is it's like I'm telling you information that might not be relevant or useful, but it's important to understand the status quo, to understand the impact on the medallion market. Again, hope I explained that. That's a lot to go over. I hope if I'm mistaken in some way in my explanation, please feel free to comment in the Substack or YouTube. But that's the status quo. That's why the not selected medallion might have a 20% premium to a selected or a permanent wave. That makes sense, right? Because it's, number one, cheaper to buy a RAV4 than a Sienna, and maybe a driver prefers to drive a non-wave vehicle. Okay, then we mentioned that we mentioned the taxi improvement fund. So this is also another big topic. A lot of stuff is going on here. So what is TIF? So in 2014, the TLC passed rule. So 2014, which corresponds to that date, the initial mandate date for the court ruling that 50% of all yellow cabs must be wheelchair wave. So in 2014, the TLC passed rules to create TIF, the Taxi Improvement Fund. The links to all of this is in the description. And the Street Hail Livery Improvement Fund, SH, that's for the green cabs. The funds were created by the regulator to increase the number of accessible NYC cabs, providing financial incentives to buy a wave. How is TIF funded? So this also got updated. So this diagram kind of easily explains it. So on the there's a surcharge here. So this TIF surcharge recently went up from 30 cents per trip to $1. And so that's how it's funded. TIF payouts to taxi drivers and medallion owners. As previously mentioned, TIF payouts are meant to incentivize yellow cab and green taxi drivers and medallion. There's not that many green taxis. I mean, there's only 857 left, according to the latest fact book. And then there's an SHL pilot, which we went over, which, there's basically a lot going on, as you can tell, but we want to be focused on this hearing. So anyways, as previously mentioned, TIF payouts are meant to incentivize yellow cab and green taxi drivers and medallion owners to adopt wheelchair accessible vehicles to help meet overall fleet accessibility requirements, i.e. 50% of yellow cabs must be waves. So taxi drivers currently get paid $1 per trip they conduct in a wave. According to the TLC, this usually results in drivers receiving between $100 to $200 every 2 weeks. Medallion owners, so when a medallion owner, which might not be the driver, are also reimbursed for the initial upfront cost to convert a vehicle into a wave or to purchase a ready-to-go wheelchair accessible vehicle, and then they get quarterly operational payments. So right now, so this basically is an incentive for medallion owners to adopt waves, because it's more expensive to buy a 60, 70, even $80,000 plus wave, as people know. And they also made new rules where you can buy a used, where you can hack up a used wave, but we won't get into that discussion. But this is the financial incentives right now. So you get $14,000 reimbursement to hack up a wave, so one payment per VIN, vehicle identification number, and then you get these quarterly operational payments, 1,000 a quarter, so 4,000 a year for 4 years, as long as the trip minimum is met, which almost everybody meets that requirement. So it's per the table above. The current Medallion owner TIF financial incentives are 14,000 upfront reimbursement for hacking up a wave, and then 16,000 plus in total operational payments, 4,000 per year or 1,000 per quarter, and operational for 4 years and beyond. Therefore, the total nominal, not inflation adjusted value of TIF benefits might be seen as 30,000 over the 4 years, so 14,000 for the initial hack up plus the 16,000 for the quarterly operational payments, to 42,000 if you run it for 7 years. I believe you get the operational payments beyond the 4 years. So, given the court ruling and TLC's recently proposed but abandoned due to now resolved lawsuit changes of TIF payouts, it should be noted that the above status code might change soon. For example, the initial TIF hack-up payment might increase while operational and or per trip reimbursements may decrease. We believe the regulator will propose new TIF-related payout amounts soon, so we'll hold off on speculating too much on changes. So, just to make this even more complex, we're not going to really get into this article too much, but back very recently in June, the TLC actually proposed new rules, new TIF payout rules. And in any case, sorry, I'm skipping around here. They propose new TIF payout. Go back to this article. Apologies for this. So basically, recently these TIF payouts, because these TIF payouts, like the cost of a wave has increased, operational, the cost to maintain cars have increased. So the TLC made new rules where I believe that the TIF payout would go up, but the operational payouts would actually go down. But basically, they abandoned that proposal because of this lawsuit. But now the lawsuit is resolved. But we assume that there could be a money issue with TIF, basically, but we need more details. But it's important to note that. So we're giving you the status quo. And the reason we're giving you the status quo is to lay out why the new rules are such a big deal. Because without basically understanding the status quo, you're not going to understand why the new proposals are such a big deal and will impact the medallion market so much. So we went over the different medallion classes, why some might have a premium, why some might not have a premium, and we went over TIF payouts and how they currently function to incentivize that. Obviously, that's going to put budgetary constraints on TIFs, on the TIF system. If now every single new hack up or rehack up, and we'll explain what that means, has to pay out these hack up fees and all of that stuff. So you need to understand the status quo to understand why these rules are such a big deal. So let's level set here before we start speaking about the impact on the new legislation on medallion valuation and how to think about that. So let's very quickly go over the status quo that we just went over. So, and I say we're going to do this super quick because we obviously just went over it. So right now in the status quo, there's selected, which is first vehicle cycle wave, then non-wave, then wave, non-selected, which is first vehicle cycle can be non-wave, so you can put a RAV or a Camry on it, then it's wave, then you have alternative fuel, which you went over, then you have permanent wave, then you have a mini fleet, which is one wave, non-wave, but those can now be broken into two selected. So these two are the main categories. They're selected, non-selected. And obviously, if you can attach a non-wave vehicle, which drivers sometimes prefer to drive, and also they are cheaper, there's going to be a premium to having that as the first vehicle cycle to start out. So a vehicle you can have, I think, for up to 7 years as a yellow cab, and so that's very important. That there's a premium to that. Someone's willing to pay if you can do that. Okay, so now, and then you have the TIF payouts as well, which we went over. But okay, so let's talk about this taxi medallion valuation impact. If the TLC has to require all taxi hackups to be waived until the 50% threshold is met, it follows all medallion valuation should, in an academic sense, at least approach one valuation. So why would you pay a premium for a non-selected, non-wave option if everything has to be a wave? So we use this infographic. Again, this is illustrative, not financial advice. This is all illustrative, but the information is based on our research, our discussion with our network, our firsthand knowledge of current valuations and prices and dynamics. But it's not financial advice. And but this is, I'll put it this way: this is how we would frame it to someone if they asked us for our opinion. Okay, so taxi medallion evaluations, illustrative impact on NYC taxi medallions. Okay, so right now you have non-selected. So you have, in the status quo, obviously, if these rules get approved, the status quo is going to go away for years. The cash price is between 100 and 125. Then for the medallion, the financed price. So there's some institution, notably Marblegate, but other institutions as well that will kind of get involved in seller financing, like selling their own medallion, and you can put $10,000 or $20,000 down. But there's a premium to those prices. So in any case, that's for a whole different discussions we'll have in the near future. But medallion cash price 120 to 125, finance price 175 to 200. So therefore, and then the non-wave, so like a Camry, a RAV4, you can, let's say the range is between 30 and 45,000. So the all-in cost range of the medallion and obviously the car you need to attach the medallion to would be 150 to 245. So let's say you bought it for 120 cash and you bought a $30,000 non-wave. So that's 150,000. This is this bookend of that range. But let's say you financed it and then bought a more expensive non-wave. That's the other bookend. That's how the range is calculated. Currently, for wave only or the non-selected cycle of the medallion, if you're buying that, the cash price is 90 to 100,000. So you can clearly see there's a 20-30% discount, or you reverse that, there's a 20-30% premium to having the option to attach a non-wave, non-wheelchair accessible vehicle in the first vehicle cycle. The finance price is 100 to 140,000. So these are cheaper, which makes sense because you have to buy a more expensive wave. And I think the appropriate range, after speaking to people, would be between 55 and 80,000. So like for like analysis, the all-in cost would be 131 to 206,000 dollars. So there's an all-in premium as well for the ability to basically buy a non-wave. There's more vehicle options as well. It's cheaper, maybe you could argue easier to maintain. This also includes the $14,000 hack-up TIF payment we spoke about. So in this bookend, let's say you buy the cash price, 90,000 plus 55,000, that's 145,000. Then you get that one-time hack-up payment. So it'd be 131 on this bookend and then 206 on the other bookend. Obviously, these are ranges, illustrative ranges, but we believe it reflects, I think, ground reality. Again, our opinion. If someone were to ask us about our opinion, this is how we would frame it. So then we write, until 50% wave threshold is met, previous non-selected, non-wave medallions would likely converge to wave selected medallion valuation. So basically the premium is going to disappear because although technically in the future, 5 years from now, I guess the non-selected thing would turn back on. There could be new rules and regulations that come back. I mean, so basically the premiums disappear. And we'll get into why we think that's going to take years for this 50% threshold going to be met. So for the cash price for a medallion, that's like a 15 or 25% correction for non-selected to a wave required non-selected quote unquote medallion. If you have to attach or rehack a a wave to a medallions that's technically non-selected, it's basically a selected medallion, a selected medallion. So there'll be a correction there in that price, and then the finance valuation actually takes a larger hit because there's a larger premium in that financed non-selected market. So that could be even as much as 25 to 40%. So this is very impactful to the taxi medallion industry and valuations that can be achieved, especially for non-selected medallions. Okay. So why do we think it would take years to reach that threshold? So, as we mentioned, there's all sorts of numbers here working. So, but we have this kind of 3,834 over 9,163. So it's like roughly in the low 40s. But then if it's, if that's the accurate number, but basically for active medallions, whatever number you want to use, whether 9,462 or 9,163, it's below the 50%, not a crazy amount below, but it's below the 50%. But in reality, by 2028, all 13,587 issued or authorized medallions have to be WAV. So that's the return of that previous paradigm of non-selected. The return of this paradigm is not going to happen till that 50% threshold is met. And so what we did here, basically, just for illustrative purposes, not to overwhelm people, but basically, if there's 13,587 medallions, obviously you can convert existing non-waves, so you can make a RAV4 into a Sienna wave or Chrysler Pacifica wave, or you can add these stored medallions as waves. So what this exercise did on the x-axis, you have conversion numbers, and then you have addition numbers. So basically, let's say you just added, you'd have to convert over 2,000 existing medallions to break that threshold. So it's still quite a bit if you actually do the math. And then let's say you do a mix of, okay, you're adding it. So I guess the long story short, or the main takeaway, is that, let's say in this instance where you convert 1,250 RAV4s and Camrys into waves, and then you bring out 1,250 medallions in storage, and they come out as waves, then you hit 50% on the authorized. So that's the main point of this. So it says, just to reiterate, for example, if you convert 1,250 existing non-yellow cab waves to wave and add 1,250 new accessible taxis on storage, you'll reach the 50% threshold on all issued medallions. And then again, the numbers it's directionally correct because the numbers are shifting that the TLC is giving, but this is going to be directionally correct. This kind of chart we put out here. As a final note, and this just reiterates this, although the threshold to reach 50% on all taxi medallions will come much quicker, versus issued, most medallion brokers, agents, owners, prospective buyers will look to compliance on total issued authorized medallions. So our main point there is that although on the active medallions, let's say you reach 50%, a buyer, like if a buyer came to us and they wanted advice, again, our opinion, not financial advice, our opinion on the matter, we would say that there shouldn't really be any premium for non-selected until the totaled issue medallion threshold has been reached. So for example, right now, in the non-taxi New York City FHV sector, there's a green rides mandate, which requires by the year 2030, 100% of all TLC plated vehicles be either wave or electric vehicle. Who's to say in 3 or 4 years there won't be a similar mandate for the yellow cab industry, especially if there's a EV wave that comes into the market. So basically, that paradigm of non-selected premium versus selected premium versus alternative fuel, all of that, I think, again, our opinion, I think that's kind of gone for the foreseeable future. So it's a massive impact on the medallion market. Okay, we'll conclude the article on a very important and technical subject, and it's rehack concerns. And so we'll explain this, and we also have an infograph. And again, all the links and everything will be provided. So another major impact the court ruling has on the taxi medallion market is whether the TLC will force medallion rehacks to be attached to a wave. The regulator appears to be proposing to do this based on a recently published rule amendment ahead of tomorrow's hearing. So it says permit rehacks of wave only. So we'll explain what that means. While requiring a wave to be attached to a taxi medallion coming out of storage is fairly straightforward. So if you're bringing out a medallion out of storage, you should kind of have expected or know that it's probably going to need to be a wave at this point. Requiring a taxi medallion already attached to a non-wave to be attached to a wave when a rehacking event happens, that's also a very big deal. Let's simplify using a real life example. So rehack example. 2 years ago, a driver entered into a lease-to-own agreement, often known as a driver-owned vehicle DOV arrangement, with their taxi garage, an agent or a manager. The deal might look something like this. Agent taxi garage is managing another individual's non-selected medallion. So let's say medallion is attached to a RAV4. In 2022, the agent purchases, let's say, a RAV4 for medallion and enters into a lease-to-own arrangement, a DOV arrangement, with a driver. The driver pays weekly. Part of the payment is related to the vehicle, the lease to own, and part of the payment is related to just the leasing of the taxi medallion. After 4 years of payments, the driver owns the vehicle, so the driver might still have 3 more years left to use the vehicle and is now only paying for the medallion lease. So that's a big deal. What would cause a rehacking event, and how would it impact an agent and or TLC driver? So let's say this is an example, and we'll combine this with this in this infographic to help explain our point here. The underlying medallion owner is foreclosed upon or pass away. Let's say that happens. Then the medallion currently attached to the vehicle has to be put in storage, and the non-wheelchair accessible vehicle needs to be attached to a new medallion. Problem: since every new hack up or rehack needs to be attached to a wave, so here it says permit rehacks for waves only. The agent and or driver cannot attach any medallion to that RAV4 that he had paid off or that they're still in an agreement. The Dove deal blows up. If a driver is 3 years into a 4-year deal, they can't use the vehicle for work. If a driver already paid off the vehicle, the benefit of having a paid or almost paid off vehicle goes away. If a driver walks away from a recent deal, let's say the deal was only made 8 months ago, the agent, so the garage, who's often effectively the lien holder, they financed the car on behalf of the driver, is stuck with the vehicle and they can't use it for business purposes. Okay, so we're going to explain what a rehacking is. This is an illustrative example, but this is actually a major point, this rehack point. So please let us know any comments in our YouTube or in the Substack below. But we'll try to explain this. So this is how like a medallion owner works with the agent, with a garage that works with the driver. So let's use this example. So you have a medallion owner. Let's call him Old Smith. He pays $100 per month to the bank. And let's say, so let's forget about the default for now. How it works right now, this used to be much higher than $1,000 a month, obviously. But how it works right now is this medallion owner gives the medallion, let's say it's an individual who lives outside of New York City or just not in the taxi business, they do another profession, they inherited the medallion, they bought it as an investment, they give the medallion to a garage to manage. The garage every month gives them 300. Again, this number can fluctuate, but currently the status quo is roughly about 300 per month, free and clear to this medallion owner. Obviously, if they got to pay $100,000 per month, it's still a functional. If that's the dynamics, that's functionally not economic. That medallion owner will keep on having to inject money in until that money goes out. If the medallion owner is free and clear, then it's it works on a on a economic basis. It works. Okay, so then you have a taxi garage. He has this medallion. It's not their medallion. It's someone who gave them the medallion. Okay, let's say in the year 2022, he buys a Camry, or a RAV4, and he pays, or the garage, I should say, pay $40,000, and they enter into this lease to own agreement with MD Khan, the TLC driver, in this illustrative example. So what MD Khan is going to do, the TLC driver, he's going to pay let's say over 3 years, let's use that example. Over 3 years, he's going to pay off the vehicle, and then he's going to be able to use that car. So this payment goes away, and so he'll be able to use that car, you know, for another 4 years. So that's a big deal for him, and then he can sell the car afterwards. I don't know how much it's going to worth. That car is going to be worth, but that's significant that he has a paid off car, and he just needs this tax medallion lease payment. We'll get into the economics of this more, obviously, given what's happening right now. The number could change, but let's say roughly a MD Con will, let's say, pay a let's say $1,200 between these two things, or $1,000. Let's say $1,000 to make the example simple. And so he pays $1,000. So you might be like $1,000 a week. So you might be saying, well, why in the world is this guy only getting $300 per month from a yield basis and all of that stuff? But if he's okay, so he's collecting, let's say, a little more than 4,000 a month. Obviously, this person, the garage has an overhead. He obviously took on a risk here. He has to pay insurance. Obviously, you've been following us. There's a bit of an insurance crisis. Insurance costs are going up. So you have to say this garage, let's say, makes between 500 to $1,000 in profit, of which it remits, let's say, $300 per month. Maybe it's more, to be frank. We'll get into that for another article, but this is how this dynamic works. So now, let's say this owner unfortunately defaults. So the bank or the owner of the medallion, the financial institution that owns the loan of the medallion, forecloses on the medallion and takes over this person's medallion. So now this guy doesn't really know probably the medallion owner. He just deals with, MD Con is just dealing with the taxi garage company. So historically, the taxi company might be annoyed, but it's okay. He'll find another medallion. He'll just rehack the car, and that'll be that. But if the rehack needs to be done to a wheelchair accessible vehicle only, that's a major, major problem, because now this car cannot effectively be rehacked, although it was operating just fine, because of this technical reason that a new medallion needs to be found to rehack to the car. So the agent could be responsible for the auto loan, or the driver could lose the benefit of car payments. So let's say MD Con entered that, like we said, in 2022, and he's just about to pay off the car. The whole deal, the benefit of him paying a lease to own so he can outright own the car, so his cash flow will improve, goes out the door, because now the car is, he can't use that car for work anymore. It's rehacked. Well, let's say a deal was made 6 months ago. Now this taxi agent and garage company deals with someone who's only 6 months of the contract, said, listen, I'm not going to make the car payments because I can't use this car. So now this guy's stuck with this deal. So I hope I explained that well. If not, just put a comment in the description, in the Substack, I should say, or the YouTube, and I can spell it out more, but I hope that makes sense. Basically, the rehack point is a major issue, honestly. And so it's something important to note. So just to, so the public hearing is tomorrow. If you want to speak at it, please sign up before 5 p.m. today, following the directions. You probably could sign up after the fact, honestly, and they'll let you speak, but just try to do 5 p.m. today. And if you want to kind of virtually attend, it's a Zoom only meeting at 10 a.m. on the TLC website. They'll provide the links to that. So we hope this was helpful. We'll do more articles about the taxi medallion industry, but this is a big deal, a big ruling. It's going to be voted on next week. So, thanks a lot for joining us, and we hope you found this helpful. Thanks.